Welcome to Candid Conversations with Dr. Kelly, where we dive deep into the conversations that matter most to your mind, body, and soul. On this episode of Candid Conversations, I'm joined by Lynne Becker, creator of Power of Patience. She shares the shocking story of her two daughters' severe concussions, the signs missed by doctors, and the critical advice she has for parents. Tune in now for this very powerful Candid Conversation. Welcome to Candid Conversations, Lynne Becker. I'm very glad for you to be on, and I can't wait for listeners to hear about you, your story, your daughters, your wonderful product. So I would love for you to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, your background, and being an epidemiologist and biostatistician. So please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kelly. It's great seeing you again. As always, I'm one of your number one fans, as your patients are. And so I'm a biostatistician, epidemiologist, and that's not typical, right? Because one is very clinically focused and the other is very math focused. And that actually happened because I was able to learn how to speak English with the numbers that I was computing and calculating, and doctors really latched on to my ability to communicate with them. So that's why I merged the two degrees. My career has been 25 plus years in clinical trial research. And everybody learned about clinical trials with COVID before, they would think, oh, do you work on skin? Because, they'd hear epi. So I'd be like, no. So at one point I finally just gave in. I go, sure, I do that too. Yeah, and so, it was funny because that's the one, I think, asset with COVID is that now they know what an epidemiologist is. So I worked on everything too. Like I started first in ocular research for my first 10 years, and that was corporate. And it was great. It was cool. I did the first LASIK studies, multifocal intraocular lenses. Eyes are really cool to work on. Very different than cancer. But after I left California and came to South Carolina, I was at the medical university and, a small university at the time, and you follow grant money. And so I no longer had a specificity in terms of ocular and ophthalmology, but I started to work in psychiatry, and then I was in behavioral health, and then I was in oncology. So I was getting frustrated because having to repeat all of my design and development of systems, data systems, was making me crazy because, I didn't want to be behind a computer all day long, even though we are. So I started to really kind of curate a skill set for big data. And how can I make these silo systems talk within the university? This was before all the great big huge electronic health record systems started and things like that. So what was cool with my career is that I not only grew up with clinical trials growing up, but I also grew up with telehealth and big data. And so that then let me curate this unique skill set as well. And little did I know that that curation of my skills would come to fruition with Power of Patience when my youngest daughter was really, really critically injured, as you know, with a TBI and a stroke. And my oldest daughter, I had two girls, my oldest daughter, and I know you'll be interviewing them, she had multiple concussions. She was that sports person and she concussed out of volleyball. So I know we're going to dive into the details, but in 2015, when Natalie, my youngest, was injured, I lost my job. I had to become her full-time caregiver, and 3 hurricanes hit our house in a matter of 2 years.
Oh,
Yeah, crazy. FEMA ended up taking our home, trying to get somebody better who was so injured, and I didn't understand it, was a challenge like no other, right? And so, and not even understanding what she was going through. So it was a journey for both of us, obviously, but that was the inspiration of Power of Patience. And so that's how we got started.
wow. Well, yes, I want to get right into your girls because that is the inspiration, as you said. So could you please share the circumstances around your daughter's
Sure.
injuries?
Yeah. So let's start with Alex. She suffered, no joke, 6 concussions. Yeah,
How old was
four.
she?
It started when she was 13. She was away at a tennis camp, a Nike tennis camp up at Furman, believe it or not. And unfortunately, she took a tennis ball straight dead center in her eye. And it was an indoor situation because it was raining, so everybody moved inside in the courts. And so now she's 28, so this is 15 years ago, right? So way before the CTE, way before a lot of stuff was going on. Um, and she was knocked unconscious. Yeah, and here's the scarier part. She had an immediate bloody nose, so everybody thought it was her bloody nose. That was the problem because that's what they could see. I did not know she was injured. I got a text about 9 o'clock that night, a text from my daughter saying, "Hi, Mom, how are you?" Because they were not allowed to have their cell phones, during the day. And they got it for 30 minutes at night so you could check in. And I said, "I'm good, honey. How's tennis camp?" I'm all excited. She goes, "Good. I got hit, but I'm okay." And I go, I'm texting, "What do you mean you got hit?" And she really downplayed it. And this is my fault. Like I used to always say to my kids, unless you're broken or bleeding, we're not going to the doctor, right? You'll be fine. Shake it off. Like, oh my God, that has haunted me. So that was a Wednesday night, and I got there Friday afternoon to pick them up because it was a short little camp. And when I got there on Friday, both of her eyes were black. Her eye was so bloodshot, she couldn't walk on a flat surface without tripping. She was so unstable, a little 13-year-old. And I'm freaking out. This was, if you remember the movie, I think it was called Parent Trap with
Yeah.
Lindsay Lohan. And the mom in the movie, she died from a head injury. She skied into a tree and she died. So it was right around that time. Yeah. So anyway, I'm like, what happened? What happened? Like, this was very different than I got hit, right? Because she never even told me where she got hit. Why, I don't even remember if I asked or not. But either way, because Natalie was there, Natalie saw the whole thing. So I'm looking for people. They never took her to a nurse. They never took her to anything. So on my way home, I'm freaking out. I called my ophthalmology friend and I said, something's wrong with Alex's eye. I see her eye. It's her eye, right? I know nothing about head injuries. And he was
You
literally,
hadn't said that she was knocked unconscious at this point, correct?
Natalie told me she was. Yeah. So Natalie was 11. Alex was 13, right? Yeah. And I go, "What do you mean she was knocked unconscious?" She goes, "Well, she was like, she was asleep, Mom." And I go, "Asleep? Were you, honey?" She goes, "I don't know, I guess. I don't know." So you're trying to figure this out. Right. Right. So, and I was a single mom. So you're freaking out. So anyway, I call my friend and I said, something's with her eye. Because again, that's all I could see. And so, that invisible injury is going to come back, very thematic here. And so she never slept. She was one of those kids that loved to run around, right? This child was out cold in the car, out cold. And I'm like, that's weird, right? Never sleeps. And I thought, well, maybe she's just so exhausted from camp. Again, I'm dismissing all these signs that were right there in front of me. And so my friend, the ophthalmologist, and he's a corneal specialist, he's like, "I'm literally passing you on the freeway, taking my kids to camp. Meet me in the office." And so now this is Sunday morning. He comes in to look at her, and her ocular pressure was 9, which means it's supposed to be 14, 15. And that's 4 days after the event. So what the heck was it on the first day of the event? So she was on the verge of losing her eye. And she was also diagnosed with detached vitreous. And I'm like, what? And he goes, "Well, now she's at risk for macular degeneration. So you detach retina, excuse me, you don't want her to get injured." So I'm like, "Well, what about her eye and her head?" And he goes, "Oh, baseball players get hit all the time. She's going to be fine." That's what I was told, right? So if this was like about 15 years ago, so where are we now? We're in 2010, that was pre-CTE with Ann McGee, Dr. McGee. So I'm like, well, okay, all right. And so I just let her sleep and do all this stuff. Never was told concussion. So then she goes to high school, and I was fortunate. Both of my children won really big scholarships to go to boarding schools. And I was like, wow, this will catapult them, right? So my daughter is at Andover, up in Massachusetts, Phillips Academy, Andover. And she then starts to have concussion number 2 in volleyball. Then she has concussion 3 in volleyball. Then she has concussion 4. So she concussed out of volleyball. And she was a starter on the varsity team when she was a freshman. She was very, very good. And so whenever I got the phone call, I immediately said, get her eye checked, get her eye checked, right? Again, didn't know. Now, Massachusetts has a rule that you have to be out for 10 days, and they do the impact testing and all that sort of stuff, right? And so they would take her to the ophthalmologist, and they're like, her vitreous is fine, she's okay. Now, mind you, she had floaters that were so severe, this young child, right? She had floaters that were so severe that she called him Bob. Bob's back. She named her floaters. And I'm like,
Explain to the listeners what floaters are.
a floater is in your eye when all of a sudden you have this weird shape floating around in your vision. And so at 13, she gets floaters. Yeah.
Wow.
That's normally somebody who is in their mid late 60s, right? Cataracts and things like that. So I knew stuff about eyes, having done 10 years of ocular research. And I'm like, that's really weird. She also used to complain about how hot she was all the time. Hot, hot, hot. And I'm like, really? It's not that hot out, right? And AC. And I'm like, so I just didn't know. So all of these signs were there and I didn't know. And then she's away at school and I don't see her. When she would come home, she would act out. I mean, act out. While she was a great student and a great kid, I was thinking, is she acting out because she's with these very privileged people? Like Andover is truly like the not top notch where diplomats send their children. It's like it was such a an award that she won to get in there. And so I'm thinking, wow, is this what happens when you're in this environment? Very naive, right? Again, another bunch of signs of risky behavior. I'm brushing it off to adolescent brattiness. Mm. I suspect now, in retrospect, it was the head injury really speaking out. She never,
How were her grades?
grades were good, weren't great compared to what she was. But I then said, well, maybe it's because it's so hard, right? I mean, she did get into Emory. Don't get me wrong. She did do well as a student. She would work really hard. But trust me when I say her acting out was legit and frightening. So we'll pause on that because she then concusses out of volleyball. And in her senior year, I remember we were flying down to Emory and she met me there. And then because she was coming from Boston and I was in South Carolina. And so I remember buying her a t-shirt because she was accepted and we were going in and it was really exciting. And she was putting the shirt on and she was really kind of moody too, not understanding yet at this point how flying impacted intracranial pressure. I didn't know, right? I'm still really naive about this whole thing. And so I remember she just was real moody. And I'm like, God, I would think she'd be so excited, like going to college and we're in Atlanta but again, I brushed it off to a teenager. And then she's putting a t-shirt on the next day. And I'll back up. The evening we went to see my sister-in-law and her husband. And I remember they were saying, well, how's volleyball? And she goes, well, I'm not going to be able to play in college. I concussed out. And Michael, her husband, he was like, you only have one brain. You have to be really careful. Don't play it off like that. And it was an urgency to his message. And she, again, she's invincible. She's 18, right? Oh, Lord. Anyway, so t-shirt next day in the college bookstore. And
Was your brother-in-law, was he A speech therapist or
No, no, just a businessman. But
wow.
they're very healthy, right? Yeah, no, just very healthy minded and things like that. He himself had some heart conditions and things like that. So very astute, as his wife was very astute with being healthy. But so then we're in the bookstore at Emory. The next day she's putting the t-shirt on, and the pressure of the t-shirt collar going over her head, she screamed in pain. Yeah. And I went, what just happened? Yeah. She goes, I don't know. I'm fine. Yeah. That'll teach me to ever say, say you're fine, right? And I go, are you sure, honey? And she goes, yeah, I'll be fine. But you could see this altered shift was immediate with her mood, the whole look of her face. Like when you see a person who is genuinely injured with a concussion, there is a very clear, distinct look about them. It's usually, you can see it in their eyes. It's almost like this vacant look. Like, and I don't know if it's that, I've never had one, so I don't really know personally, but I don't know if it's because the pain is so insurmountable or they become so introspective. I don't know what it is, but it is an immediate shift. So again, I tried to understand and give her space and all that stuff. And boy, get in their faces. That's all I got to tell people. Get in your kids' faces. So I just said, okay, so we finished all that. We go home. So now that's concussion 4, right? So that was, I can't remember the year. I'm going to say probably 2014, 2015. And then she graduates, and then Natalie is going to school. Now I must have my dates mixed up because Natalie was injured in 2015. So, but the point is she graduates and goes to Emory, and then she's starting. Natalie is also at boarding school, at a different boarding school. And she is now in her senior year. She was one of those ambassador mentors to new students, a prefect and all that. So she was there at school a week early, and it was a required game that the incoming students played to the upperclassmen, right? So that you could make friends, boys versus girls, in a game called Shark. What is Shark? Yeah, there's no water involved. And so it is essentially a soccer dodgeball game combined. And how it works is you have a partner, boy, boy, girl, girl, and you kick the ball between your partner, and every time you kick it, you get a letter, SHARK. You spell the word shark. You can intercept the ball, right? So Natalie and her partner could have intercepted the ball, and then they could have kicked it. So once you get to that K, it becomes a free-for-all dodgeball game. You pick the ball up, no boundaries, no nothing, and you throw the ball at the opponents. Yeah.
Girls as boys.
And it's a soccer ball, not a dodgeball. The game was over.
Was this inside or outside?
Inside. And the game was over. And the boy continued to throw the ball at Natalie, point blank range. And she goes to protect her face with her hands up. And she turned also, right, to deflect it. And he threw it so hard, they said it was the equivalence of a 24-pound sledgehammer hitting her head.
Oh my.
And he hit the left side of her head. And she was immediately knocked unconscious. And yeah, and I don't even know for how long. Nobody has given me an accurate description of the story. Like the whole thing is, all I can imagine what I've heard is that it was like the Colosseum of the Romans. People are screaming, the music is playing, and Natalie's knocked out. And she was now 98 percentile ranking, Division I swimmer. This girl was fit. And so I don't know how long. We've even done hypnosis to try to get the whole story. And she remembers when she finally came to, she felt like she was underwater, like she was trying to come out of it. And she really couldn't talk or anything. And then they got her over to the benches, and then they put her in the corner, and then she starts the whole dry heaving, the vomiting and all that. And hours, like 2 hours go by, and then they stick her in a golf cart and they drive her out to the athletic trainer in the field. So she's like a rag doll. This is in 2015. This is actually on her birthday. It's like when she was turning 17. It was crazy. Yeah. So I am at Emory with Alex, moving her in. And I had planned to go to Natalie's boarding school because it was her birthday and I was going to celebrate it. And so I then get a phone call and we're buying her birthday cake at the store. And Alex goes, Mom, it's for you. Something's wrong with Natalie. Because she grabbed my phone and my hands were full. And I said, what do you mean? And so I get the phone and it's the trainer. And hi, it's so-and-so. And, we think your daughter has a concussion and she can't talk and she doesn't know her name. She doesn't know what day it is. And we think she has a personality change. I'm exactly like your face. My mouth, I drop the birthday cake. I start shaking and I'm like, what do you mean? What's personality change? Like, again, I'm still really naive to the whole head injury concussion thing. Yeah, that's how I was told.
I have
And
goosebumps.
yeah, and so I said, I want to talk to my daughter. And she sounded like she was in a fog beyond fog, like a distorted voice. Like, who am I talking to? She knew nothing. She didn't even know it was birthday. Then Alex talks to her, and Alex goes, Mom, I've had a lot of concussions and they were bad. Something's wrong with her. And I go, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. So I rush Alex back to her dorm, and then I rush over to where Natalie was. And I get there. I'm arguing with them to take her to the emergency room to get a CAT scan. So the only real experience I have is, again, being remote from my daughter when she was away at school, Alex, but I knew they would do CAT scans. I knew it, right? This school is arguing with me saying, no, we'll just take her to the nurse's office. And I'm like, you get her for a CAT scan. So instead of taking her to the children's hospital, they took her to an urgent care. And it was a big urgent care and it was new, but the EHR system, the electronic health record system, the whole thing went down that day. And I don't find that out until 6 months after the fact. They forget about her in the room, but they send her home. By the time I get from Atlanta, this was in Chattanooga, Tennessee. By the time I get to Chattanooga, less than 2 hour drive, especially if you're driving fast because you're freaking out as a mom. So, she's already back in her dorm room. Yeah. And so I'm thinking to myself, this doesn't seem right. And she's stumbling, kind of like the story I told you when I first saw Alex, right? She's really out of it. And I'm like, oh my God, why is she in her dorm room by herself? And they're like, well, the doctor said it was fine. And, she's just got a concussion. She's going to be okay. I'm like, really? Really? Now it's a 7 hour drive home. I put her in the car with me. I have a hotel room. I take her to the hotel room. I keep waking her. I'm Googling what can I learn about concussions, and I'm like nothing is coming up. And I mean, simple stuff, but you're trying, because I come from research, because I come from clinical trials, I'm really trying to understand what the heck is happening to her. And again, there's always a delay of onset symptoms. And I think you've heard this probably with your patients. It's like the onion layer. A new thing comes up because a new trigger comes up, right? So
Like
I,
injuries.
yes, yes. And so I am literally up all night trying to read whatever I can read on my phone. And all I knew was that it was bad, but how bad, I don't know. Because parts of the story I told you, I didn't find out until months after the fact, right? So I bring Natalie back to her dorm. I had thought, I'm bringing her back home. Like, I know school is starting. That's okay. Let's just get her checked out at home. She couldn't make a 2 mile drive from the hotel back to her dorm without holding her head in pain, screaming, crying. And I'm thinking, I'm never going to be able to make a 7 hour drive. I knew that I couldn't fly her. It was just too risky with that. So I told her, I said, I'm coming back. Get everything in place. Like, get the doctor's appointment set up. You need to just rest so that you can make the drive. You're to stay in the nurse's office every day. I'm going to make sure that they just keep you there. I don't want you going to school. It's the first week. And again, my children were always taught, you'll be fine, shake it off, all that sort of stuff. And they want to do great in school. So Monday, I get a phone call, Natalie crying, hysterically, freaking out, panicking. They're sending her to school, and I'm arguing with the nurses, I'm arguing with the dean, I'm arguing with everybody. And their entire school was one of those advanced schools where it was all whiteboards. So now you have a head injury and you know about screen time. And she's literally freaking out. And so I am like, again, of course, I'm sure I got a mark next to my name. Oh, Miss Becker's calling again, right? So I'm getting everything ready, set up for her at home. And then on Thursday, I get a phone call from the nurse practitioner at the school, telling me Natalie was found on a bench, slumped over. She can't talk. She has no feeling down the left side of her body, and she doesn't know who she is. Yeah,
Oh, oh my gosh.
4 days after the head injury. And I went, is she stroking? And they went silent on the phone. And they said, we're sending her for an immediate CAT scan. We think she is. You think she is? Her face is drooping. She can't talk. She doesn't know who she is. And she has no sensation down the left side of her body. I don't know. Isn't that what fast is?
Yeah.
So I call my neighbor.
For a CAT scan. You ask for a CAT scan.
Yeah, I drop everything. I run into my boss. I tell him what's going on. I call my neighbor, get everything ready with the animals, drive. I went and grabbed, all the clothes, so on. I drive through the night to get there. I think I got there about 2 in the morning or something, maybe 2 or 3. And the house parent is there in her room. And I said, what did the cat scan say? What happened? How is she doing? And they're like, oh, she's fine. Oh, they didn't do it. And I go, what? They didn't do it? Why not? And they said, I don't know. They did a talk screen instead. I said, a talk screen. And they said, yeah, she was really out of it. And they thought maybe she was doing drugs. And I went, didn't you tell them she had a head injury? Didn't you tell them? Like, are you kidding me? Yeah, that's the first of many. Yeah. Yeah. So because I come from the space, right? I come from research. I come from working in hospitals. I come from that area. None of this felt right. And so I just kept saying, this isn't right. This isn't right. This isn't right. So I'm there living in the hospital room with her for the next 2.5 days. And I'm like, where are the doctors? Why isn't there a neurologist? Where's the CAT scan? So that's the whole story of how it all started. And they never did the CAT scan. They argued with me saying, we're going to report you to your insurance company that if you remove your daughter, you're doing it against doctor's orders and medical advice, and they won't pay for this. And I went, go ahead and try me. We'll either take the IVs out of her or I will. So yeah,
Your mom.
they never did the CAT scans. Never.
Wow.
Yeah, I got her home. Took it took I can't even like tell you 12 hours, 14 hours. And we had to drive through a storm because the South. She's holding her head, screaming, crying, the praying. I don't know. I don't even know what the heck is happening. That was my introduction into traumatic brain injuries.
Oh my gosh, your introduction was traumatic.
It was. It really, really was. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah. And yeah.
Wow. So during your drive, were you needing to stop and take breaks for her? Like, was there anything to help or alleviate anything during that time?
Yeah, we had to stop. So it was like one of those torrential wricane downpours. Like were probably going 20 miles an hour and the wipers are going and just the noise of that and the pounding of the rain. Oh yeah. Yeah, we stopped all the time. I had to. I had to. Her crying was just too much.
Oh my gosh.
And nothing would help. Honestly, nothing would help. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about, of course, the message of brain talk, just remembering that a lot of doctors are not trained in concussion.
No.
And all of the symptoms that were missed and even the other, medical professionals, the nurse practitioner
Yeah.
being aware, no speech therapist being brought in and
No.
you said, just what I want people to understand. You know, you said the doctor said, or someone said, oh, it's just a concussion, she'll be fine. And I really want people to know, like, it's not just a concussion. Yeah.
Oh, no. So let's kind of touch upon several things you said that really can illuminate this empowerment, which is, the path that I then decided to go down with helping people. So, I was 55 at the time, and I'm thinking I lost my job and we're having all these hurricanes and I have to take care of my daughter and I can't get a job. Who the heck is going to hire me? And you have to reinvent yourself, right? And so, which I did, but I was also fortunate. I did go back to work for a short while with the Department of Defense, and we'll get to that because that was also illuminating with Natalie's recovery as well. So one thing first was that turns out they never read her images, because if they had read her very first set of images, 18 months post-injury, when I brought her images to a neuroradiologist that I wanted to apply for a research grant with, she immediately flipped out and said, your daughter is filled with brain bleeds. Like, how did she survive? And the big peanut brain bleed in her brainstem. 26. Yeah. How did they miss all of them? And Kelly, I took these films, the CD-ROM, to 4 independent radiologists. And I kept trying to not be emotional, but how do you not be emotional, right? And so, yeah, I swear what they do is they are so stressed for time. They don't take the time to reread. They just go by what the first set of notes are. And that's why advocating for yourself, when you know better, you have to listen to yourself and keep pushing through. So that's the one thing to kind of hear in this message. The school she was at is a CDC heads up school. So everybody was technically trained in that heads up protocol, but it's not what they did, right? And then when we eventually got orders and found a doctor that really could diagnose her correctly, which was up at Penn at CHOPS, and then we had to find the therapist back home in Charleston, speech therapy was ordered for her. And every time she went to the speech therapy for the assessment, it was a good day. And so they said, oh, she doesn't need it. And I go, but her face isn't drooping today, but it droops and she slurs. And they're like, well, she's doing fine, so we're not gonna order it. And so I would have to keep going back and going back.
This
So she
was
never.
speech therapy saying this, or someone else?
No, speech therapy, yeah. But now, were they really trained in neuro and TBI? Probably not, because I think we went through 5 or 6 physical therapists, because every part of her body truly broke. Her optic nerve was torn. She had a heart condition now. She's colorblind in one eye. Like, what?
This is Alex.
Natalie, this is my youngest.
Natalie. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah, her body would swell when storms would come. It would swell like an Oompa Loompa. Atmospheric pressure. Yeah. And I'm like truly every part of her body broke. She couldn't satiate herself. She would just eat and eat and eat. And I'm like, you're eating like you're swimming, but you're not swimming. Like, are you really this hungry? She goes, I just can't get satisfied. I'm starving. Yeah. And then she gained tons of weight. And so then the only way she could moderate it, right? The tricks was she would look at what other people are eating and she'd eat that, right? The compensatory skills that she started to figure out on her own. So yeah, it was like a major, major, major rehab journey. We didn't know that her field of vision in the eye that was the optic nerve that was torn, the left eye, it was essentially like she was looking through a paper towel tube. That was her field of vision. And then her right eye was trying to see everything. And so my ocular research, I knew her eyes were supposed to work like a team. They needed to do everything together. So another hint, like, what's real vision therapy? And the neuro-ophthalmologist I went to all the wrong doctors, just like everybody else goes to. Neurologist. One insulted me and said, you're just here because of the movie Concussion. And I went, I'm here because I don't know what's happening to her. I need help. So yeah, it's like 5 neurologists later. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so
Upsets me.
they're the wrong doctors to go to. What
Yes.
really needs to be is the physiatry doctors. And the physiatrists have a identity crisis because nobody knows they exist, right? So we're trying to and then speech and occupational and the neuro PT, those are the functional doctors to get these people better. So anyway, yeah, so they said, well, we think her nerve might grow back. I go, okay, I know nerves don't grow back unless it's like 10, 20 years down the road, if you're lucky. Like you think? Yeah, she's colorblind now, but we'll see. Maybe it'll come back. What? Why not? Like,
They were speaking this
yes,
cavalier, like, oh,
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. It was just so ridiculous. And that, again, it showed and told me it's the wrong profession. They don't know what they're doing in this space, right? And so when I started to now say, okay, where's the research? Let me get her on a clinical trial. We have to do something. That was when I discovered, and this is where you mentioned not everybody knows how to care for them. No, they don't. They really don't. And vision therapy is a whole different ball of wax, right? That should complement everything and getting her neck straight so the signals go through. So anyway, at the time when I searched for a clinical trial to put her on, because I am an advocate of that, I do believe in them if they're done right, just like anything. And so there was maybe 1,200 clinical trials at this time when I researched it at the clinicaltrials.gov. And that is since the inception of the FDA requiring trials to be registered. And I went, 1,200? That's all? So I compared it to oncology, hundreds of thousands. That is why not everybody knows. And our healthcare system works a clinical trial, pushes it up to the FDA, they say yay or nay, and then it gets adopted and then pushed back down. So it's a cycle, right? And so what are the best practices? What are the standard of care? How do you assess it? And because your brain runs everything, it's like a Rubik's Cube. Dial it up. Here it is. This is the color pattern today. And nobody has started to think about the external influences like you do, but people like me. And then I started to track manually my own daughter so that I could get them to listen because I was that emotional mom. I would say, if you do this, she will be in bed for 4 days. And what does that mean? It means she's going to drop out of school again. It means she's not going to be able to get back on her feet again. It means she's not going to be able to cook an egg. It means all of these things in the game of life. And so it wasn't until I did that manual tracking did they really start to listen to me and brought me in as part of their care team. And sometimes Natalie would be catatonic and she would not want to talk. Sometimes she would say, I'm totally fine. Say, what? Tell them how you almost set the house on fire. Like, why do we talk about that? Yeah, yeah. So that's where there's a point where caregivers are so crucial, particularly in the early on stage, until that inflammation calms down, until they start to get a grip, and until they really learn, I can only go this far today, and then I need to rest. And so, yeah, it was a huge journey, huge.
wow, oh my gosh. And to hear both girls had an issue with their eye or their vision, um, oh my gosh.
So fun
Huge.
fact, in brain injuries, I think I found a report approximately 90% of head injuries have an ocular impact. And when you think about it, the eyes are the window to your soul, right? But it's the pathway to your brain. Our visual intake actually has cognitive implications, which then also relates to balance and depth, visual field. And so it makes perfect sense when you think about it that way, why vision therapy has to be paramount in pretty much every brain injury case.
Absolutely. I was saying before, I've got my 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 words about me now. But that's why it's so important for the athletes themselves, for kiddos themselves, for young. I always say everybody needs to know this information. But both of your girls were like, "I'm fine, I'm
Yeah.
fine, I'm fine." But if they knew the signs and symptoms and they could self-identify and say, "This is what's happening to me," maybe there is something wrong. I think that really could have changed things.
Yeah, so let's talk about that because that's really, really important. So Alex ends up so four, right? And then she gets two more. First, she gets a teeny rear ending in her senior year, start of her senior year. She had our car and she um
Senior year of high school or college?
college. She was at the stop sign and somebody kind of clipped teeny, right? Like if you look at it, you're like, oh my God, like what's the big deal, right?
It's
So
concessions though.
well, what it did was it elicited all of her symptoms, and she couldn't stop vomiting for 3 months. And
3 months?
yeah, she lost so much weight, and that was when during one of Natalie's very acute phases, and so she didn't come home, and then she came home, and I went, oh my God. And she then even called me. She goes, Mom, I need one of your kind of doctors. I have so much pain and this and that. And so that was when we found upper cervical. So bottom line was she started to have seizures and she wasn't ever a person with seizures ever. And so, yeah, crazy. So this upper cervical doctor in Atlanta, he was amazing. And he also said he was a concussion expert. And of course, I'm like, yeah, sure, everybody's a concussion expert. I was so sarcastic, but I speak with love in my heart about him. He was really instrumental in getting her better and was able to show me how Natalie's neck was twisted. Her C1, C2 were twisted, which explained why any therapy she was doing, the messages weren't going through clearly. So her neck had to be stable. And now, mind you, Kelly, Natalie hadn't made tears for 4 years. 4 years. She was suffering such chronic dry eyes, and they tried everything. They were going to plug her tear ducts. You could see her muscles in her eye. They're like, she has an 80-year-old woman's eye. And I went, again, one eye, right? So you knew it was head injury related. And so, yeah, it just being able to find what therapies to do when, and I do believe there's a pattern of when you have to do it. So Alex gets better, and then, not 100% because she's still dealing with emotional stuff, right? But I don't know that she's hiding this. And she calls me one day and says, if I don't get some mental health help, I'm going to jump in front of a bus. Yeah.
Oh,
And she's accepted in law school. She has a kitten and a boyfriend. And I'm thinking, oh, dear God, now what? Right. And so immediately get her to a therapist. And I believe in a balance of Eastern Western medicine. That's my personal belief. Stabilize that body, stabilize that mind, and then get them in a healthy space where they don't drug dependent, right? What are the compensatory skills that you have to learn and do and things like that? So we get her in that track, and I'm like, holy cow, from a teeny, not even a fender bender, like a scratch, right? But it set off all these things in her. And then we get her better. She's doing great. And 2 days before graduation, she'd run over in the crosswalk. Yeah.
what? What do
Yeah.
you mean?
Yeah. She was on a scooter going to work, and there's an elderly man didn't see her and ran her over. Yeah. So up on the hood, down. Yeah. 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 So that then is right before COVID, trying to find her doctor. She refused not to go to New York. That was, after graduation and so on, because she was going to law school. So anyway, so
Law school was in New York.
clear distinction of her grades in that first year, right? And when she got the right therapies and things like that. So then at least I knew what therapies we had to look for, right? That was the good thing. But in what you said was, what if the athletes knew? So one of the things that has recently come up, and we're starting two IRB clinical trials, some pilot studies with some Division I schools on cheerleaders, right?
Mhm.
everybody's okay with giving up their cheerleaders. They don't want you to touch their football players yet, but they will. Trust me on this one. So, but what the NFL has introduced is spotting. So they have independent athletic trainers in the booth, on the TV, on the field, and they spot. Players are also allowed to self-report a concussion now. And so I read this and I said, let's come up with a similar approach. Let's have spotters and let's look at cheerleaders, because one of the things that I learned from the sports medicine docs that we're looking at or working with, they told me that they can get their football players better, but they can't get the cheerleaders better and they don't know why. And they're like, is it hormonal? And I'm like, no, it's not hormonal. Think about it. They're being flown in the air. They have no padding and they're being dropped and they're teeny, right? And so it's mathematics, it's physics, it's force mass acceleration. And so it's a different impact versus football players. So we have the math formulas, and that's when I started to kind of think about these things in that kind of mathematical way, the trends and the trajectories. So the NFL last year had a 200% increase in self-reporting of concussions by players, which was great. Now, we all know about Tua, right? And his injuries.
Yes.
And so, that's in my opinion, that's a sad story. The risks that he is introducing to his body, head, mind. But through this patient-reported tracking, Sally, the virtual therapy dog platform that I created, like I took my manual tracking and now automated it for people. We, with the help of MIT, have now published a research paper on computing how bad is my bump on my head, right? It's called the IISS, Injury Impact Severity Score. And it's 6 little questions, yes, no. Because a lot of times you go to a doctor, right? And because we have no standards, we're still groping, we're all reaching at straws, whatever the flavor of the day is what we'll do. But in research, the best way to define a population and define a study is to understand what the patients are going through, to fully understand the symptom profiles. And so that is what the IISS does. It takes all of their words, and we have a standardized approach. And this is where AI is beautiful for this kind of application. You're familiar with regression models, right? BMI, your basal metabolic index, or your body mass index, excuse me. That's a typical example of a very simple regression model, predictive model. Well, take that and apply artificial intelligence, machine learning, et cetera, to it because of the kinds of data. People talk to Sally. So we take that and then we created this score, and it is 97% confident. And we can now tell you how bad the bump on the head is. So we remove the mild, moderate, severe. So now if you have this number and it's standardized, what we're able to tell people is you should have lost consciousness or not. And if you lose consciousness, despite my daughter Natalie's case, you're supposed to have a clear pathway of care, right? Very distinct, very full with the assessments, rather than the you'll be okay, shake it off, go home and rest. So that is where we now are able to say this is a potential preventive score for repeated head injuries, right? So Dr. Ann McGee is now showing that these bumps on the head, not the obvious one and done, right? That you're on the field and you're carried off in a stretcher, but the little bumps on the head are cumulative. And if we're able to show you've crossed a threshold, you need way more assessments. Perhaps we can prevent the obvious head injury that is looming in your future. And I don't want to sound like gloom and doom, but you have to take this much more seriously than what people have been doing.
Absolutely. It's not just a concussion,
Yes.
just like you
Yeah.
said. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you talk about Sally
Yeah.
and power of patience, and also how can people learn more about the score that you were just talking about, and how can they access it, implement it, all the things?
So Sally, first of all, is the name of our free, so patients and caregivers don't pay. It's a tracking mechanism for TBI, stroke, dementia, and
Long COVID brain fog.
long common brain fog, yep. And so we
She
help
did
people.
say free, everyone. It is free.
And so the idea is to help you show your words, turn your words into data and show your doctors, right? So that together you can work and get better. So we just finished a project with Puerto Rico, the University of Albazoo in Puerto Rico, and it's an outpatient clinic for stroke patients and the student workers. And we had 100% engagement with the patients and caregivers. But one of the real big take-home messages was that the patient never realized and learned so much about their own symptoms and triggers, right? Because that's what Sally can help you do. If you go outside in the bright sun and you don't really know that's going to impact you, but all of a sudden you have a massive migraine, that's where Sally starts to come into play. So we collect information about your injury, whatever kind of injury it is. We collect information about your symptoms you're experiencing. You can change them on and off all the time because they come and go, right? It's an onion layer. And then we just ask, what did you do? And that's where the algorithms come into play. It's very simple, very simple. You have an 82-year-old stroke patient that just went, this is great. I love Sally, and we love her. And so she gets into data and I'm like, you rock, you know? We have another speech therapist in Canada, and she has a patient that has been using Sally, so we can also do a paper with them as well. And her patient started with 30 symptoms. Her patient is a special education teacher, and she was injured by a student that she teaches. So she wants to be back. So this is like something too to kind of like think about. People with head injuries know who they were. And we don't understand that part. Like they know who they were, they can't seem to get back there. And that was one of the things that I always tried to kind of ground myself with. What is it like to wake up not being able to go swimming anymore for my daughter, Natalie? What is that like? Like, she loved the pool. So I would always try to put myself in that position so I could understand and have more empathy for the situation, which is very hard on a caregiver, very, very hard. So her patient, though, went from 30 symptoms and she's down to 18, simply by engaging and making her goals coordinated to her symptoms that she's trying to change. So the more we become aware, we are alerted to a trigger, the more we can now start to say, okay, if I'm going to do this, I better have this prepared, right? So you can recover or you prep for it. So Sally, powerpatients.com, you can go to the website, log in or register, and it's free. And then the IISS, the Injury Impact Severity Score, we just received, our publication is today. So, woohoo, hot off the press for the Journal of Neurosports Science research. And we got really, really great compliments about us being forerunners in this space with repetitive head injuries and how to close that knowledge gap we were talking about. And so we have not released that on the dashboard yet. We wanted the publication first, but you actually can, use it and play it with it. I can't remember what the website is called. I don't know. I'll send it to you. We'll put it in the show notes. But
Okay, yeah, we'll put it in.
I'm afraid. I'm not afraid. I don't want to cause people scares and fears and things like that when their scores are very high. It really is something that we want their provider to work with them, and so that they can collaborate and engage with one another. So we're trying to figure out what is the best way to introduce the IISS across the board, because it is their number, but we want it to have some, not a public health like rage. Like I don't want people to freak out. So we need to make sure that we are very careful and mindful of how we introduce that to the public.
Brilliant.
No.
Um, I would like to know what advice you have for parents of athletes, young people. Natalie was not even playing sports per se when
Right.
her injury took place. So, what advice would you have for parents of athletes and children who are not athletes who are navigating TBIs?
Yeah, so a trauma surgeon that has recommended Sally for his patients because he discovered that whenever there's a face fracture, you have a TBI. So think about it, your skull, your face is the strongest bone next to your thigh bone. I didn't know that. Well, he discovered that if I could refer them to Sally, we could start to collect their symptoms, we could get them to the right rehab. Because what happened, his patients were referred to neurology and nobody was seen ever. So that's a very typical thing. So parents of athletes and non-athletes, you, the caregivers, know your children the best. No ifs, ands, or buts. So what if you're that crazy mom or dad? So what? It's your child's health. And if you get a doctor like I did that accused you of being there because of a movie, go to a different doctor. Go to somebody who listens to you. They are out there. And that's one of the things that we are working on furiously, is trying to find a network of providers that we can refer, like to you. Like, can you see this person? And then from there, then we'll be able to have a referral pathway for people. So that's a labor of love that I do, just, for people when they do reach out to me. But I will go to all the efforts to help them find providers. But as a caregiver, parent, spouse, whatever, athlete or non-athlete, you know your child the best. You know your athlete the best, and get in their face. Like, I didn't get in Alex's face, and she was away from me. But when I saw her, I knew something was wrong. So that's really, really important. And to be honest, track, because it's not going to cost them anything. And if anything, it's going to give them data to show the doctor. And the movie timeline between doctor's visits is what's super important. Because in the office, I don't know about you, Kelly, but when I go to the doctor, I am always 2 inches taller and 5 pounds lighter, right?
Of course, of course.
So what that means is, and there's a lot of research in this space, what that means is, it's called the white coat disorder. Lots of research. We go to the doctor and we are not sick. We're fine, right? Air quotes around fine. And we lie. We don't tell them everything. What we're seeing people tell Sally tons of stuff. So that will illuminate the doctor. That will give you a hint, like, well, okay, you seem okay today, but can we talk about 3 days ago when you had an outrageous fit? What happened? What caused it? And that, because we also forget, right? We got a lot of crap going on in our world. We forget what happened 3 days ago. So I can't stress enough, track. You don't have to do it every day. Just do it. And it's simple. It takes a minute. Like, it's really that simple.
Wonderful advice. Hey, for all of my speech therapists and other healthcare providers, let's be honest, writing soap notes can be time-consuming and exhausting. But with Freed AI Scribe, documentation just got a whole lot easier. Here's how it works. Freed AI uses artificial intelligence to record your sessions and instantly generate accurate professional soap notes. That means more time to focus on your clients and less time stuck doing paperwork. Freed AI is HIPAA compliant, which made it easy to incorporate into my private practice. And it has been a game changer. It saves me time, reduces stress, and best of all, helped me finally get out of the office at a decent hour. If you're ready to simplify your documentation, use my code DrKelly50 for $50 off your first month's subscription. And join me and other SLPs who've made the switch to simplify your soap notes. The link and discount code are in the show notes. Now, back to the episode. Okay, so we've come to the point in the episode where I like to do the candid questionnaire, and it is 5 questions that help listeners just get to know you a little bit better.
Okay.
So, first up is what is one word that your friends would use to describe you?
Energetic.
I like it. I would have to agree. Even the gentleman who connected us, he was like, "You gotta meet Lynn. You guys have such similar energies. I think that you guys would really vibe." And oh my God.
Uh-huh.
And he was totally right. So, okay, I
Yep.
have to agree. Yes, energy. All right.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Okay, number two. If you could instantly master any sport or physical skill, what would it be and why?
Oh gosh, tennis. I haven't played in 20 years. I just started to pick the racket up and I just love it. It's just an invigorating game and it's a head game also. And so I just love the athleticism of it, the quickness of it and the focus. So I like
Okay.
tennis a lot.
All right. Well, I'll have to bring my racket and come
Yeah,
down and play. I've been playing since I was a little girl. My dad is a tennis fanatic, so as soon as I could walk, he had a racket in my hand, and like we
you're
play as
on.
a family.
Oh,
So,
I love it. I love it.
but I'm in the rusty boat with you, so so
Yeah,
we'll be able
yeah.
to take our time with
Perfect.
each other.
Perfect. Perfect.
Okay, number three, what is one activity or hobby you find most relaxing for your brain?
Oh my God, I love to bake. Baking. Easy. Easy peasy baking.
And
And
that's tranquil and relaxing for you?
oh yeah, because I look at it, I usually never have all the right ingredients, so it becomes a chemistry class for me. So I'm like, well, this might work. Well, let's see.
Well, and do those little pivots, do they work out?
Sometimes, I gotta admit, sometimes, yeah.
Okay, all right, all right. Well, I hope to try some of the baking maybe after the tennis match.
Perfect. Perfect. I will bring some.
Okay, what is the weirdest or most unexpected item in your bag or your car right now?
A dog bowl.
Which
It's the
patch?
patch, and so he gets thirsty all the time. So I just left a dog bowl in the car.
Brilliant. And he'll eat, I mean, excuse me, he'll drink in the car?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Braxton will not drink in the car.
Prefer like if we're out and about hiking or whatever, he won't drink outside the car. He will drink inside the car. Yeah.
Lynn
Yeah.
has a beautiful dog named Patch, so friendly. And Patch came to Brain Talk Day. That was such a beautiful surprise. So cute. Okay, last question. What is your go-to guilty pleasure? TV show, music, song, or
Candy.
movie?
Candy.
Candy?
Chocolate. Yeah, like really good chocolate.
Ooh,
Like
like?
like like a Lake Champlain chocolate, or there's a chocolatier downtown in Charleston. Christoph's is his name. So like some exotic dessert is absolutely positively like, and it looks like art. Like they make candied apples, but it's not an apple. It's a cake in the shape of an apple, and I mean a true apple, and it's green, like it's a green apple, and then inside is a ganache filling. Like it's ridiculous.
Oh
Yeah,
my
that's my
gosh.
that's my go-to. I'll bring that
Okay.
along with my homemade bake thing and you can compare.
I'm just thinking about all the all the exercise I'm gonna have to do after I visit. Because I definitely want to try that. That sounds amazing. Wow.
Yeah, it's good.
Great. That is amazing. Great
Yeah,
guilty pleasure there.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, maybe that explains the energy.
It could,
Good
it
sugar in
could.
there.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh. Well, this has been amazing. You have such a phenomenal story. I'm glad that you were able to make such a fantastic pivot and be able to provide such an amazing tool, product, however you'd like to refer to it, to the masses. And I can't wait for this to be like a staple in people's
Yeah.
organizations and sporting organizations, but as you said, people who have suffered a stroke, people who have dementia, long COVID brain fog. I have one of my patients who is using Power of Patience for that. So this tool can really reach so many different people with so many different diagnoses, and I just can't
That's what
wait
we're
for
working on.
the
Yeah.
word to continue to spread. And I champion you. You're
Yes.
in my presentations anytime I do a talk. So I love that we've been connected, and that we get to do this together and support each other. So just thank you so much for coming on and taking the time. This was
Of
great.
course, of course. Yes, and bigger things to come for us as well. So always, always your champion as well too. Thank you, Kelly. This was great.
It is my pleasure. Well, I know that we will talk soon, but thank you so much for being on. Thank you for tuning in to Candid Conversations with Dr. Kelly. I hope today's discussion left you inspired, informed, and ready to take on your next challenge with a clearer mind. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, keep striving for a healthier mind and a happier life. I'm Dr. Kelly, and this has been another Candid Conversation.